Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video, I wanted to discuss the speech that Marco Rubio made in Germany. I'm not going to break down the entire speech or go line by line. I actually encourage you to watch it yourself and form your own opinion. What I'm more interested in is what that speech represents in the broader political climate we're living in right now. If you are a person of African descent, you've probably noticed how cynical and pessimistic a lot of people have recently become when it comes to pan-Africanism. The idea of unity, of cooperation, of building trade, infrastructure, shared institutions, and actually leveraging the immense natural and human resources on the continent for our own benefit. A lot of the cynicism and pessimism is illogical and emotionally irrational, yet it permeates among our people right now. Meanwhile, you have white politicians openly speaking about unity, sovereignty, and power. They're tapping into nostalgia. Nostalgia for a strong Europe, for a dominant West, for an era where their nations dictated the terms of the global order. You hear rhetoric about no longer being ashamed, about moving forward without constantly apologizing for the past or worrying about the moral implications of their action, about rejecting guilt as a political framework. In that speech, Marco Rubio commented that America is a byproduct of Europe, essentially a child of European civilization, and historically speaking, he's not wrong in terms of the colonial foundations of the United States. But what's important here is what it implies, that the Western world sees itself as a civilizational bloc bound by shared heritage, shared identity, and shared geopolitical interests. And what I see happening, not just with Rubio, but with figures like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and other politicians across Europe, is an attempt to revitalize a collective Western identity. In a sense, it's basically pan-Westernism in layman's terms. And it's not subtle anymore. It's about strengthening Europe and America to ensure that Western dominance, in other words, the Caucasian race, doesn't fade in a multipolar world. This is the sharp contrast between some Caucasian men and some Tanagerian men today. And just to be clear, I am not saying all Caucasians share in that view. However, you don't need all members of a race to be on the same wavelength. All you need is a few influential people to shape the collective mindset of the masses to align with what you plan to accomplish. This is where my concern comes in. We don't have nearly the same number of ambitious Tanagerian leaders on a similar wavelength, pushing that same unifying message. And while some Tanagerians are debating whether Pan-Africanism, Afro-World, and Black Constellation are realistic, whether unity is even necessary, the most powerful political blocs on earth are doubling down on unity. They are saying, we need to get stronger, we need to be more self-reliant, we need to consolidate power. And if you're confused by terms like Afro-World and Black Constellation, check out the links to the videos I've made in the description below. Anyway, people think, oh, if Trump is voted out, everything goes back to normal. But we are beyond that stage, and it's naive to believe that too. This isn't about one man, this is about a broader ideological and generational shift. Trump was just the catalyst that put the gears into motion. It was going to happen one way or another. You see similar sentiments not just in the US, but across Europe too. There's a consolidation happening. And let's be honest, it's not just the West. If you don't think similar conversations are happening in China or Russia, you're mistaken. Those nations are also thinking in civilizational terms. They're thinking about sovereignty, dominance, influence, technological leadership, and military power. Every major power bloc is positioning itself for a world where strength matters more than moral appeals. There's constant global discussion happening, and the continent is completely left out of it. And whether people like it or not, Africa is a representation of the Tanagerian race, and its state dictates how the world will treat us. I feel like there are a lot of us who believe things can't go back to being bad, but that is a foolish outlook to have, especially seeing that Africa freeing itself from colonialization was sheer luck. Yes, luck. Africa gaining independence from direct colonial rule was not something that happened because Europe suddenly developed a conscience or because Africa became strong enough to overpower its European colonial masters. It was a byproduct of global disruption, particularly after World War II, when European powers were economically and militarily weakened. Had that war not occurred, had those empires not been destabilized due to their own incompetence, it is very possible that large portions of Africa would have remained under formal colonial rule for much longer. I mean, look at how strong neocolonialism is still gripping Africa today. That's a difficult reality for people to sit with. Yes, we talk about neocolonialism and acknowledge that economic and political influence still exists, but the point is this: Global power shifts rarely happen because dominant powers voluntarily relinquish control. They happen because circumstances force change, and the circumstances of World War II favored us. And once you realize that, you'll understand why I am always hammering that we need power. Power that allows us to shape and control our future. And now, we are entering another transitional period. I know Africa is not perfect. There are serious internal challenges, corruption, instability, and underdeveloped infrastructure. But in a world where major global players are openly preparing for intensified competition, fragmentation, and strategic rivalry, one where they're no longer going to be tied down to any self-imposed moral dilemma, it is naive to think that moral arguments alone will secure African interests. It is even more foolish to think history won't repeat itself. What fascinates me is the contrast in mentality. On one side, you have Caucasian leaders across the world openly talking about strengthening unity and preserving dominance, with many of the populace following in support. On the other side, you have some Tanagarians dismissing unity altogether, saying ethnicity is enough, saying continental cooperation is unrealistic or unnecessary. It all feels so orchestrated and deliberate. There is a mismatch in strategic thinking. And what I'm saying, very clearly, is that relying on reminding Western nations of the horrors of colonialism as a long-term strategy is not sustainable. If political culture shifts to a point where leaders and their populations no longer feel morally compelled by that history, then what leverage remains? The answer is simple. Power remains, and that's how it has always been throughout history. Power respects power, and strength negotiates with strength. That does not mean embracing hatred, but it does mean understanding that the global order is not maintained by appeals to morality alone. It is maintained by coordination, economic leverage, technological advancement, military deterrence, and a unified political vision. We are in a very sensitive era. The world is reorganizing itself, and whether people want to acknowledge it or not, racial identity and civilizational politics are playing a huge role in shaping what comes next. The question is not whether that reality is comfortable. The question is whether we are prepared for it. Anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I'd go on further, but like I said earlier in the video, I already expanded on what I would have said in the video featuring Afroworld and Black Constellation. So, if you'd like to see my take on those subjects, be sure to find the link to the video in the description below. Let me know what you all think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.